You need me to move the camera or anything?
No,
Would
no,
it be
no,
better?
you're perfect.
All right.
But you already knew that. I mean, come
Yeah, I don't know about all that,
on.
but
All right. Hi, I'm Patrick Flair with bagmask.com. Today we have Todd Decor, also with bagmask.com. And we're going to talk a little about taking calls, sort of the ins and outs of it, salary, where you stay overnight, all that jazz. But before we hop into that, Todd, I'm just curious, what's, off the top of your head, what's been like your best or your worst call ever?
the best would be easy to recall. It was and honestly, so I've been doing this. Well, I finished anesthesia school in 2008, so almost 16 years. And there's been one weekend where I was on call and did not get called in. So 16 years and one of those. But yeah, that would easily be the best. Worst, oh man, God, there's so many to think of. Actually,
All right, wait, why don't we just cut it off there before you scare everybody off from taking calls?
oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean honestly, all in all, it's not all that bad. I mean, just like anything, there's going to be not too bad, whatever, and sometimes worse, whatever. In this case, call. I was on call last night, as a matter of fact, and it was a little bit worse than usual. Nothing horrible, but worked till about 11:30 last night. Which is much later than we typically work on call. Um, but you kind of take the bad with the good. You certainly when you have those call nights where you finish up at 7 p.m. and you go back to, for me, since I live out of town, I go to a little call house, and I'm sure we'll get to that later. But I go back to the call house, go to sleep, wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and you're like, man, is my phone working? Is the time right? I didn't get called.
Yeah, there's a
So
little bit of scariness about that also when you wake up in the morning. You think something might have happened.
yeah, 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 for sure. And then you realize, hey, it's all good. I just didn't get called in, and it was a beautiful night. So again, you take the bad with the good, and again, all in all, I think it's really not so bad.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things you have to get used to. I got to admit, I've been fortunate enough in my 16-year career also where I've been at many facilities where we haven't had a lot of call burden put on us. A lot of times it's been more like you're in-house type of call. Like you're there, you're just automatically responding. You're not at home being called in type of deal. But real quick, my favorite call of all time, it was my second year of practicing. It was in-house call, Thanksgiving Day. There was another one of my colleagues there. We were both young, no kids at this point in time. We both played video games. And so Thanksgiving Day, I brought my Xbox in and we played video games for like 12 hours over the course of 24 hours. Nothing happened. There was no OB call. There
That's
was no
great.
OR surgery. Completely unusual. Um, by far the best call at all time. And there was holiday
You know,
pay on top of it, so it was great.
oh yeah, that makes it nice. That does bring to mind one call shift, and this is a little different in that it was a backup call shift. And I will tell you where I work currently. In backup call, we don't get bothered too much. Honestly, in the 2.5 years that I've been at the hospital I'm at now, I've only been called in probably once on backup call. So it's pretty, it's pretty light on backup call. And anyway, my son, he was probably 16 at the time, so about a year ago. I was on backup call for the weekend. He came and hung out with me, and we went mountain biking all weekend. I was close enough to the hospital that if I got a call, I'd know the trail well enough that I could take some shortcuts, get back to my truck, and get back to the hospital in 15, 20 minutes if I needed to. So I would have been okay. But yeah, I guess that would probably be my favorite call shift. But again, it being backup call, I don't really consider that real call shift.
Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, there's different types of calls. I mean, there's the in-house call that we sort of talked about. There's first call, backup call. Some places they have third and fourth, and
Yeah.
all those places are a little bit different. And that's one of the things you really need to think about. When you're taking a job, are you going to be comfortable with taking the type of call that they have? Because that really impacts your work-life balance. I mean, fortunate enough for you, that example of being backup call, you got to still enjoy doing regular things with your family. Um, it's just one of those things you really need to think about. Now, out of curiosity, um, so the places where I've taken call before, it's sort of been built into your salary. Also, was at a place where it was extra pay basically. You got to hold. There was for holding the beeper. There was some pay for that, and then if you got called in, there was a minimum amount of time you get paid for, and anything else outside of that, there was additional hourly pay. Out of curiosity, the place that you're at right now, is it built into your overall yearly salary, or is it one of those things where you get paid for the hours you're working?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, honestly. Yes and no. To answer your question quickly, but that doesn't give you much information. So our primary call, our first call, is baked into our salary, and we don't get any sort of additional pay for that. Our backup call, on the other hand, there is additional pay for that, and I'm not entirely sure why we do it that way, other than maybe, and we'll probably get to this a little later. Part of the incentive to take primary call, well, number one is we are required to do it. There's that. But aside from that, typically we're off the day after our first call, our primary call. Backup call, you're generally working the next day. I say generally, I mean really always. You're working the next day after backup call. And so I guess to incentivize that, the guys who had, set up the way we run the practice before I ever got there, decided we're going to incentivize backup call with a little additional pay. So we have additional pay on top of our base pay that is for any backup calls we take. And, it depends on which day of the week. Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, as you might imagine, are worth a little bit more than Monday through Thursday, that sort of deal. We don't have any additional incentive for holiday calls. I know you mentioned that you guys get holiday pay and that sort of thing. We don't have any of that sort of deal. But one other thing, you mentioned you guys would get pay to hold the beeper, so to speak.
Yep.
And then if you got called in, you get a probably a minimum amount, I think is what you said. And then beyond that minimum hourly, whatever hourly guarantee, then you get paid over and above that if you work more time.
Correct.
We just have a flat rate for our backup call. It's X number of dollars for a Tuesday, whether you work 0 hours of callback or 7 hours of callback. So, and honestly, and I don't know if you want to get too deep in the weeds, but the place I worked before, we had a little bit of a different deal where we had our base pay, then we had additional pay for primary call and additional pay for backup call. There it was similar in that no matter how many hours you worked on primary or backup call, you still got the same flat rate. So it wasn't hourly. It was just kind of a salaried sort of, amount of money that you make for taking that call shift.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it makes a difference too. Like if you're working in a facility where backup call is, you're not going to be, there's a high chance you're not going to be called in, then it's not really that big of a deal. I think it becomes one of those things where you're constantly getting called in. Is it,
Yeah.
your time is worth something, and you got to make sure that you feel comfortable with that, because that can be a deal breaker for some people. I mean, I know me myself personally, just where I am in my stage of my life with my kids and stuff like that, I've been extremely fortunate to find a job recently where I don't really have to worry about taking backup call or call at all in general. And there's two reasons because of that. One is I fortunately live far enough away, and the other thing is they were okay with that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you really it's gotta be worth your time, it's gotta be worth your time, it's gotta be worth your money. It's just gotta be the right facility also. I mean, that can make a big difference too. If you're at a really good spot, it's that trade-off is well worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that honestly, it's probably going back to my years as chief. I spent about 10, 11 years as the chief of a practice in Kansas, and just interviewing too many people, honestly, over time. You come to learn, and it's obvious when you work in that system, you come to learn that probably one of the most important things for people coming into a practice is they want to know what is call like. I mean, how many hours are you typically working on call? Are you off the day afterwards? And again, I'm sure lots of other things that we will discuss here, and I don't want to jump the gun, but I mean, I think most seasoned anesthesia providers, this is nothing new to them, but somebody who's maybe earlier on in their practice, or maybe hasn't even begun their practice, or maybe somebody who's 20 years in and has always worked at a practice, maybe like yours, where you don't take call. Maybe this is something good for them to hear, because again, it can be probably the biggest dissatisfier if things aren't what you want. And it can also be a good thing, to be completely honest. If you're making extra money to be on call,
Yep.
and you want that, and and other benefits such as maybe being off the day afterwards and that sort of thing, it can be a pretty good thing, oddly. So yeah, I do think it's an extremely important thing for anybody interviewing to really dive into and make sure you understand it as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and talk to, the people that you're interviewing with, to talk to the other people that are working there, anybody that might have worked there in the past. And I mean, you bring up an interesting point about, making some extra money. I know people that would pick up everybody else's extra call sometimes because they
Yeah,
want to make that extra money. So it's a great way to put a little more cash in your pocket. And if you're going to a place, that's a question you should ask. Are people, how do they trade call? How does that work?
yeah,
Because that can play a big role because things pop up in your life. Kids might
yeah.
have some type of concert, or I got a daddy daughter dance showing up in a couple weeks. I had to talk to somebody like, hey, man, this just showed up on this schedule. So
Is that why you were
some of those questions
breakdancing? I
out of
talked to you a
character.
few weeks ago.
Pardon me.
I'm sorry. Is that why you were breakdancing when I caught you a few weeks ago?
My breakdancing days are over.
Busted your
Once I hit for everybody out there, I'm about 6'4". Once I hit like 6'1", my dancing got really, really awkward. Slow dancing, I'll still do that. So we'll see. Daddy daughter dance, I'll make a
Yeah,
fool out of
yeah,
myself. Not a big deal.
yeah, 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 for sure, man.
But out of curiosity, with you mentioned when you take call, I think you said they have a house for you guys to stay in. Do people stay in the house? Do you stay at your home? Do you stay in the hospital? What's the deal with your practice?
Yeah, so our practice, we in-house call is not required. That's great. Unfortunately, I live about 35 to 40 minutes away from the hospital, which is too far away to be on primary call. Really, it's too far away to be on backup call either. Um, so the hospital has given us a couple options. There's a room inside the hospital that we can stay in. There's probably four of us in the practice who live just far enough away that we can't be at home on call. So there's a room inside the hospital that we can use if we want, and then there's another a little house. It's nothing spectacular. It's 100 yards from the facility, but it's nice to just get away and not be down the hall and and people know that and say, oh hey, while you're here, I know it's 2:30 in the morning, but while you're here, can you just help me with this or whatever. I mean, not that there was a ton of that, but it is the kind of thing that may happen occasionally. But again, even if it wasn't for that, it's just nice to get away, be away from the hospital, and just have like your own space for a little bit while we're on call. We all share the house, so there's again four of us who live far enough away that we take call away from not at home. So, we never any more than one of us in there at a time, of course, since only one of us on call, on primary call anyway. Um, and yeah, so it's again, nothing spectacular, but it's a nice little bonus that the hospital has for us, truthfully.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just be able to step out of that hospital for a little bit, especially because I'm guessing from the way you're explaining, like you work like a regular day shift and then you go on call until 7 o'clock the next morning. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, when you're on call, you're just there until the last case finishes, and then and if there's a need for anything overnight, then you're the one they call. The backup call person, as you might imagine, would just be there if I'm working and if something else is needed. Typically, it would be something like OB, and if it's if I'm in a 10-minute case, it's almost done or whatever, and OB calls for an epidural, I can certainly get up and take care of that lady in enough time. But if I'm in the middle of a 4-hour case, I'm not going to make her wait, obviously. So that's when we'd call the backup call person. But yeah, to answer your question, just work till the last case is done. Our hospital's not so busy that it runs 24 hours a day like some large facilities do. Generally we're pretty good, and most of our surgeons are good about trying to finish up by 5 p.m. As you know, nothing goes quite as planned, and so it's not too often that we're finished by 5. But typically we're done 6:30ish, 7. Usually we're done by then. Last night 11:30. But yeah, so usually you leave in 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then if there's a need for anything, you get called back in.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I always sort of forget, and I think we've talked about this in the past, is I work in a metropolitan area, so the idea like things just sort of wrapping up by 5, 6 o'clock is like mind blowing.
Yeah, no, I get it. Your
Always
facility's
stuff
pretty
going on.
big.
It's not like it's crazy all the time, but I know those days where things do wrap up like at 5 o'clock and we get to go home a little bit early. It's just like it's the greatest treat in the world. But then you're sitting in traffic, so there's traffic,
Yeah, there's a
which is
trade-off.
actually more stressful sometimes than being in the OR. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so out of curiosity, I think you take call, what, every 13th night? Is that correct?
Yeah, on average. So we actually have 12 providers now. We've just been approved for a 13th. So
Okay.
once he or she starts, then we'll be 1 in 13 primary call. Same thing for backup call, 1 in 13. Um, Nobody would really get rid of primary calls because, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is that we have that incentive for backup call. So if I didn't want my backup call, it is very easy to give it up.
Hmm.
And so at that point, I could take less than 1 in 13 backup call. But honestly, the money's pretty good for it. And again, we don't work much on backup calls, so it's pretty cush. So yeah, it's pretty rare if people give that up. Maybe on the weekends we would, but
Gotcha.
during the week, nah.
I feel like one of the things people, especially people coming out of school, think about is there's a bit of a mental game with taking call. I know some people just sort of this. It's sort of much like when you're a student and it's Sunday night and you think about going back to school on Monday. That idea of like call coming up in 2 days or the next day. How do you normally handle it, or have you just been doing it for so long now? Is this part of your natural, your rhythm?
Yeah, I mean, jokingly, I'm in a bad mood for about a week before my weekend call. No, I'm kidding. I mean, honestly, once we get that 13th provider, and man, I mean, our primary call will be 4 times a year, four weekend calls a year. That I can
That's not
handle,
bad.
right? I mean, it'd be a bit much for me to complain about that. But I mean, I don't enjoy it, because I leave Saturday morning, leave my house Saturday morning, I head to the hospital, head there for 48 hours and come home Monday morning. So I don't enjoy that much of it, but again, it's part of the deal, and I've gotten used to it. It's really not much of a deal for me anymore. The hardest things are when you alluded to this earlier, is when your kids have something and it maybe wasn't planned or maybe something got added on. Actually, my son got invited to play in a soccer tournament in Tampa, and actually I'm leaving on Friday for that, day after tomorrow. And it was a last minute thing. This team said, "Hey, we like how you play. We'd like you to come play with us." And I had a call on this Friday and on the Monday following. We would, if I were to go, and I am going, but at the time I'm thinking, if I'm going to get to go to this, I got to get rid of my Friday call and my Monday call. And so
Hmm.
those are the things that can be a bit stressful because I didn't want to miss this opportunity to be there with him, but I knew it might be a bit of trouble. But and this is something I think is really good about the group I'm with now. I mean, the guys and gals, we have men and women in our group, but the guys and gals all work really well together, and we've all got families, and things always come up, and we're really good about trading with one another. And the guy who took my call on Friday, I didn't have anything to take, or he didn't have a call that I could take back from him. So
Hmm.
I've been following up with him every couple of days, or about every week or so. I'm like, man, as soon as the next call schedule comes out, I've got one of your Fridays. I promise. Anyone, you just pick the one you want, and I'm going to take it from you. So we're all like that. We all help one another out, which I think is a really, really important thing. Because otherwise, I mean, for example, this situation in particular, I would have had to miss it, and it would have been a really big deal for me.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, there's a lot of sacrifices we make in the medical field, and you sort
yeah.
of learn to live with them. But like you said, finding that right group where that people are willing to help out and share, it's key. I mean, it helps in so many different ways. Um, Out of curiosity, are there any other tips or tricks think people should be looking out for when they're either looking for a job to take call or if they're taking call themselves currently?
I mean, if you're looking at a job, I definitely think talk to, obviously you'll have the person, likely the chief, talking to you about the practice. I mean, I would certainly pick the brain of some others that you come across while you're there. Just ask them, hey, what's the call burden like? What's the most difficult part of being on a call? What's the easiest part about being on a call? I find asking open-ended questions like that makes it a lot better than, hey, how is call bad?
Yeah.
And well, then they're thinking, well, let's see, it'd be nice to have an additional provider. So no, it's not bad. you know, I think asking open-ended questions, and you can kind of get a sense. A lot of times you got to read between the lines. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just asking as many people as you can while you're interviewing, what their thoughts are of call at that facility. Because again, it can be a big dissatisfier if things aren't set up right.
Oh yeah, I've seen groups fall apart because they don't have enough call takers. Basically, people are
Yeah.
leaving, or they have older people in the group that are, they're no longer participating in the call. Also, so it falls on a smaller amount of people, and then they end up leaving, and then the pool gets smaller and smaller. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can everything else can be perfect about the practice. I mean everything else, but that call, it can destroy it.
Yeah. 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 Certainly.
Yeah.
And then even, I mean, I did some locum work when I was at a facility in Kansas, and call there was just me, and so that was, I mean, I say that, and really that's kind of how it is here. Of course, I have somebody on backup that I can call at any point in time if I need it. But at that facility, it was a solo practitioner type setup, and so when you're on call, I mean, there may not be another anesthesia provider in that county. So that's the kind of thing, you really got to think twice. Is that something you want to do? I mean, even though like last night I'm on call, it's just me, I'm there by myself. I know that I've got a backup call person. If if things got bad, I can call and he or she can come in and help me. um, and then, I've had other facilities where there's always two of us in the hospital at any point in time
Hmm.
if there's a call case. So there's lots of different types of call. And each one of those three, certainly you think about things differently when you start doing a case in any of those three situations. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. At what point did you feel like you were comfortable enough where you were the only practitioner, like in the county? Was that a couple years into your practice, or
Oh,
right out of
I
school?
mean, I didn't do it until I was probably 12 years into my practice.
Mhm.
It's a different thing, man. It's, until you do it, you don't realize that you're comfortable with it. I mean, your first time you step out, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm thinking things through a little more thoroughly at this point because
Yes.
I can't turn and say, hey, come give me a hand with this. So you definitely think things through a little more thoroughly. I mean, I don't know, to answer the question specifically. I don't know. I mean, I didn't do it until about 12 years into my practice. And part of that was just because I really liked where I was working, and the
Yeah.
way we had it set up there, it was, different. There was always two of us, and it was the anesthesia care team model, and I liked where I worked. So I didn't have a desire, and I had a locum opportunity popped up, and it was with the company I was working for. They had a facility about an hour and a half away. They needed some help there. And so they reached out to some of the more senior people in our group, said, hey, would any of you like to go do this? We need help. And, of course, they incentivized it, which was nice. And so several of us did that, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's good to be comfortable,
Yeah.
obviously, before you step out into that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. You definitely want to be comfortable. I mean, you want to be confident in what you're doing, because during those training periods, it's you definitely have a lot of, you like I said, you always know you have some backup, and it's one of
Yeah.
those things. I think people need to be confident too. You do have the training, you do have all the
Yeah.
knowledge. It's just
Yeah.
applying it. And like you said, I think you said, take your time and really thinking through it. Don't get
Yeah.
rushed into anything, because once things, as you know, start going downhill, they go down very, very quickly.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you can start thinking about all the stuff ahead of time, and even have the, if you can, if it warrants it, if it's really something that shouldn't be done at that point in time, pushing that case back to where there might be more hands available
Yeah.
for something.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
One of the things I used to always tell students when we had them was, be confident in what you know and be confident in what you don't know. And I think that little bit of advice would go a long way with the students. At least I thought it would. Maybe they didn't take it the same way I thought they would. But I mean, I really feel like, if you know that you know something, know that you know it. Be
mhm.
confident in that. And if you're not quite sure, it's okay. Be confident in the
Yes.
fact that I'm not certain about this. Anyway.
Yeah, that's sort of a little bit of a side tangent. I mean, when you're looking at groups, it's you don't always know this when you go into with the group, but if you can find a group where you can go to them with anything and ask them, like, hey, I'm just not too sure what to do with this, and they're very willing to be like, all right, let's look at it this way or that way, as opposed to being judgmental. That's the type of group you want to find. I mean, I'm very fortunate
Yeah.
in a group right now where someone will pop up like, hey, I haven't seen this in years, or this is brand new to me. What have you done in the past, or any recommendations? And it's just like, all right, yeah, let's take a look at it, type of deal. Um, it's another one of those culture things. It's sometimes
Yeah.
hard to figure out when you're interviewing, but it's still a question you can ask. I mean, you can pose
Yeah.
a scenario to somebody like, hey, what happens if X, Y, and Z? How would you handle it? Are you able to go talk to somebody about this very easily? Um, yeah, just knowing that somebody has your ear and a different way to look at something, it's so important for your job.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think culture is one of the most important things, truthfully.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate you hopping on the call tonight and talking a little bit about call. It's I hope everybody out there has learned something, or can take something from this. But thank you very much, Todd, and we'll see where we go from this. And stay tuned. I guess I have to do a break dance for you guys later on. That video will be to follow. I might end up in the hospital though if I try something. We'll see. All right, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.